So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
I want to talk in just a moment about one of the top streamed shows on Netflix. Fascinating reality TV show. I'm not recommending it, but it is interesting to see some of the trends going on behind it. But before we go there, a question that is really important came through on Instagram from Nabida. And the question is, what do you do when your teenagers tell you they don't want to go to church anymore? This is a rough question. Because here you are, you have your teenager, you have them raised in your home, you're passing on this faith, and they're saying they don't want to do something that, one, you do as a family, two, is important for passing on the faith, and three, it's a crisis for you as a parent to hear that your child very well may not believe in God. And that's what's so scary about this trend of not wanting to go to church is for many, especially during COVID, we've seen this trend of many young people losing faith in God. And, we've seen a lot of this surrounding social media use and conversation and the culture of skepticism we live in. But as a parent, what do you do when your teenager says they no longer want to go to church? Number one, and I know you've heard it a million times, I'm going to say it again, you must pray for your children. Whether your children go to church now, are struggling or not, pray for your children. Pray for the gift of faith for them. Number two, fast for them. When Jesus Christ comes down from Mount Tabor, where we see the transfiguration occurs, when he is raised up into heaven before Peter, James, and John, and Moses and Elijah are there, and we hear God's voice speaking from heaven saying, "This is my beloved son." In that moment, after he comes down from the mountain, there's a demoniac and there's this work that the apostles are trying to do in casting out this demon. And they're not able to do it. And Jesus says some demons are only cast out with prayer and fasting. Now, I'm not saying your child has a demon, but what I am saying is many circumstances in society today, we must fast. If we want to see the power of evil that is coming in and stealing the faith of so many people today obliterated, we need to participate in fasting for those whom we love. And so prayer and fasting together are so important. Third, I really want to encourage you, this is where the conversation starts to happen. Instead of giving your argument right away as to why your kid has to go to church, start by asking why. Why don't they want to go to church? Ask them, do you believe in God? Why don't you believe in God? What's your argument for not believing in God? Make sure you do so in a non-hostile way, making sure even things such as body language, tone, attitude are very relaxed so that you're not making this a bigger issue. It is a very big issue, but it is one where they need to feel comfortable, one, to have the conversation, but B, to probably think through questions they might not have actually thought through. And maybe when your child first tells you or is first starting to approach claiming they don't want to go to church, maybe you're not in a good place to have that conversation. You need to give it, in half an hour, a couple hours, a couple of days. Maybe even prepare them, say, hey, I have some questions I'd like to talk to you about, so that they have time to not feel confronted, but they can actually start to think through it as well. Now, I think that, so far, 4 things: pray for your child, fast for them, ask them questions, and then 4th, make strategic moves. And I think this is really important. Make strategic moves. So as you start to gather information from your child about why he or her does not want to go to church or why they do not believe in God, often a lot of what's happening is your kid needs to be inspired in their faith. And so they need to be around people who are going to help inspire them. That includes mentors. That also includes peers. And I think that that's really important. So I'm not saying throw your kid right into a youth group program. That might be really bad for them, depending on what their attitude and their demeanor is about faith. But what I am saying is maybe you need to be in an environment around people who are more so on fire for their faith in a way that would be conducive for your child. I've known people who they've had to change parishes they go to because perhaps the preaching was more robust and the kid was having a really hard time with lousy preaching at church. I know some people who have changed parishes and traveled quite a ways to go to a parish where there's more reverence surrounding our Lord and receiving Him in Holy Communion. There are reasons why a lot of people are making choices to go to parishes that show more reverence, that have people who, I'm not trying to make, people sound better than some areas or not, but where their kids can see an example of a devotion and a practice of prayer that is more visibly respectful than some circumstances, to be honest, we sometimes see. I can tell you firsthand, growing up in Southern California, it was really hard at times to see their irreverence in receiving Holy Communion, to see the irreverence that would occur during the, consecration, during parts of the Mass, before and after. I have a really close friend who struggled for years with believing in the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And once he started attending a Mass that was more respectful, once he started to see people who took their faith more seriously and weren't just showing up to church to check off a checkbox, it was a game changer for him. But there were also a lot of people praying and fasting for him at the same time for his faith, helping him to overcome his skepticism, helping him to overcome his lack of belief in the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And so these are very important. I think that, again, prayer, fasting, ask questions, and remember, listen, and 4, make strategic moves if you need to change parishes, change people you and your kids are spending time around. I think if your kid's saying that he or her does not want to go to church anymore, that's a big sign that things need to change. And your teen might not like it at first, but it's worth helping to save their soul. It's worth their faith in God. And finally, should you or should you not make them go to church? I think that the better question and the conversation to have with your teen isn't that you're making them to go to church. It's that in our home, as a family, we go to church. And you can even say this, I can't force you to believe in God. I can't force you to participate in Mass, but what I do ask is that you go with us as a family and that you act respectful. And I think that in having that expectation without sounding so forceful, 1, you're still exposing your child to God even if they're mad for going. But 2, it's your house, they're under your care, and you have every right to require that they go to church, but we can handle better perhaps how we enforce that without aggravating too far in the midst of what's already an existential crisis for many teenagers. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. The topic of young people choosing not to go to church is a trend occurring, especially over the last couple of years. We have to remember, as people of faith, to set an example of hope, to set an example of joy, to set an example of conversation and learning, of listening to other people's opinions and thoughts, and even struggles with their belief in the Eucharist. And we should know if our loved ones are struggling with a belief in the true presence. We should know if they're struggling with skepticism. So engage in those conversations in the home and make sure others feel welcome to have their opinions shared to you as well. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. We'll be back on Monday for our next happy hour. Don't miss it.